It was a real sink or swim situation. It was something. I mean, that's why you go to those places. You just go and you get your reps. You just get to be on TV and figure it out.
When I was 28 years old, I packed up my things and moved to Billings, Montana to become a television anchor and reporter. I knew I was getting out of my comfort zone, but I had no idea the extent to which I'd feel like a complete fish out of water. The new job, the odd hours, the location, all of it. One of the few stabilizing forces in my life was my coworker, Jonathan Marcus. We hadn't seen each other in more than 20 years, but I reached out to him for this podcast so we could reminisce about what it's like to be a local news anchor and reporter. During our conversation, we sometimes brought up people we'd worked with, so just know that if you hear names like Scott or Natalie or Larry, they were colleagues at the news station, which was the NBC affiliate with the call letters KULR. We were on Channel 8, so the station was known as Color 8. Oh my gosh.
You look exactly the same.
You look completely exactly the same. I mean... I can't tell you how great it is to see you.
It's great to see you too.
I feel like a little nostalgic, you know?
Yeah.
You were really like such an important person in that really pivotal point in my life, you know? And too much time has
so
passed.
Nice.
What happened?
It's amazing. I don't know. The blink of an eye though, right?
So let's go back a little bit. You were there at least a year before I got there, I think, as I recall.
I think that's right. Because when you came, I was already doing the weekend news, right?
Yeah. And I was hired to co-anchor. I think I co-anchored with you for a short bit, and then you got off it. And then I just took it over.
Yes.
You trained me.
Yes. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
What drew you there initially? How did you end up there?
In Montana?
Yeah.
Well, I originally planned to be a lawyer. When I graduated from college, I went to DC for a year and I worked as a paralegal in a big law firm. And this was before the days of doing things electronically. So I was in a warehouse type situation with boxes everywhere and needed to review all the documents. And I thought, this cannot be what I'm doing for the next however many years. And so I began looking for something else to do. And I was really searching and I didn't know, but I like doing creative things. And I thought maybe this was something I could be good at. And I went to Boston University to get my master's in journalism.
Oh, that's right.
And of course, the thing to do, at least at that time, was you put a tape together and you sent your tape out around the country. And I remember I got offers from Jim Hale in Billings, Montana, from a station in Harrisonburg, Virginia, from a station in, I want to say, Sioux Falls, Idaho. I don't remember.
South Dakota.
There was
somewhere.
Some third option. But Montana seemed like the most appealing of those three options. And I remember Jim Hale calling me on the phone with his voice. Remember Jim Hale's like this deep, rich timbre
TV voice.
You know?
Yeah.
Right. And I remember him pitching me on Color 8, and that was pretty clearly the way it was going to go for me.
So when I got this offer, they said you can come up and visit. I mean, mind you, they didn't pay for me to come up and visit. I had to pay my own. Right. They wouldn't pay for anything. But I paid to fly up there. I was living in LA at the time. And I have this distinct memory of you. I think you're the first person to greet me with this huge smile. And I actually went and I kept journals at the time.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to read you what I wrote about my impression of the station when I showed up there.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled about my co-anchor, John. He seems like a really solid, smart, and funny guy. I definitely clicked with him the most of anyone. He gave me an honest appraisal of the situation. And then he asked, so are you kind of freaking out a little, or are you okay? And I responded a little of both. I think he'll be a really good friend, and I imagine we'll have good chemistry on air. I'm really looking forward to working with him.
That's so nice.
I thought it was funny I wrote that because my memory was also the same. I remember you having a really big smile and you just sort of took me under your wing, showed me around. Here are the editing bays. Here's how you edit. And you were sort of like, all right. I also was a fish out of water when I came. I came from cities,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing. And you were like,
Yeah.
you'll be okay. You'll be okay.
Yeah. It was like ending up on another planet, wasn't it? When you arrived at that place?
I think I felt that way the entire time.
Yeah.
No one gave me any training except you and the other friends there,
Right.
the coworkers. None of the management, anyone there was going to say like, here's how you do things. It was completely thrown into the fire. In fact, I was hired to do one thing and then less than a week later, my whole job changed and they were like, you're doing the new news.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I don't know how to produce a newscast. I don't know how to anchor a newscast. What am I doing?
It was a real sink or swim situation. That's right. It was something. I mean, that's why you go to those places. You just go and you get your reps. You just get to be on TV and figure it out, right?
Do you remember being really nervous and scared initially, or you seemed like you were more confident than I remember feeling?
I was terrified. I was completely terrified. I had to do the sports. And not
Were you
only
hired
did
for sports?
I was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I was the weekend sports anchor. And
Oh.
I just had to get on TV. And not only did I have to be on TV sort of for the first time, not knowing what I was doing, but I had to at least pretend to be expert in Montana local sports. I knew
Yes.
nothing about
And
Montana.
pronounce all the names right. Do you remember that? Haver, Havre. They were like, don't dare pronounce it Haver or Havre. You have to pronounce all the names correctly of all the local towns.
Yeah.
So you had to not only pronounce things, but understand all the like probably rivalries and everything going on.
You lose all credibility if you couldn't pronounce the name. So what I remember, one of my early shows, I had to go through all the scores of all the high school teams. And I'm reading them, and I probably botched, 25% of them. And Tina Elliott was the weekend anchor. We had time to kill after I went through all of these scores and mispronounced all these names. And so Tina Elliott thought that was a good time to go over my mispronunciations with me on the air. We had a minute at the end of the broadcast. She said, you pronounced this wrong.
Rude.
This was wrong. I don't think she was being malicious, but she was trying to kill time. And that's how she decided to do it. That whole thing was just unbelievable.
It really was unbelievable.
It was incredible. How about Dave Rye, our anchor, being a Republican legislator?
Completely biased about everything. I mean, he was a piece of work, that guy.
Yes, he was.
I mean, the stories about him. I was the weekend anchor, so I had to go on at like 10 o'clock. He called me at like 8:30 one time on a Saturday or Sunday night, right as I'm trying to get ready for the show. And he said, well, you really regressed last night. And that's and that was all he said. No constructive criticism. It's like, well, thanks a lot, dude. That really is helpful. Then one time I walk into work and sitting on my desk, there's an ad printed out from a newspaper or something that they're paying like $20,000 or something for egg donations for women who've gone to Ivy League schools.
Oh, wow.
Just sitting there on my desk.
It was from Dave.
From Dave. I was like, what? Am I supposed to do a story on this? He was like, no, I just thought you might be interested. I was like, this is so completely inappropriate. He's just the most random guy.
I mean, think about all the craziness that took place there. We had a roving one-armed cameraman named Crazy Full Moon Eagle who was on methamphetamines, as best I could tell, that would go around in the middle of the night. He would drive around the Montana highways looking for crashes.
With the police scanner going.
And he'd come back with pitch black video, and there'd just be like a shining orange light, I guess a car would be on fire and that would end up on the news.
Because it was footage.
It was video. You had to have video.
And then those poor cameramen, you remember Kenny and Larry?
Yeah.
Those guys got paid so little. It must have been we got paid so little.
Well, we got paid, my starting salary at Color 8 was $15,500 for the year.
I thought mine was $18,000. I don't know why it would have been more, but maybe it was just a year later. So what were those cameramen getting paid? Nothing.
Yeah, they got paid absolutely nothing.
And I remember Larry would pack a couple sandwiches for the whole day, and they would drive around in those vans. But they were so cheery. They were good guys.
I really had affection for Larry Larson. He was very childlike. And I remember we would go around in the car and we would listen to music on the radio and we would sing. And he delighted in singing songs when we go on the stories. So we had a lot of fun.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
He was just a sweet guy.
Yeah, he was. So was Kenny. Sweet Kenny Bouchard.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So, yeah, you had those guys. You had Snowbird. He was a Native American man who would drive around on his bicycle. He would circle the Color 8 parking lot.
Now I'm remembering him. Yes.
Remember? And he was like our biggest fan, Snowbird. And he'd be there all the time. You had people coming through the newsroom like Micah Ullman. Remember Micah Ullman?
Do I ever? Tell me your memories.
Well, I mean, you could not make any of this up. Micah Ullman, I guess his uncle was an anchor on the LA News, right? Mm-hmm. And so he fancied himself the next generation newsman.
Mm-hmm. He just 100%. Sort of swanned in. Yep.
Yeah, he was going to make the big time, Michael Ullman. And he came in, beautiful tailored suits, impeccable hair, the ready-made delivery. It's like, where did this guy come from?
He just was coming in to read that teleprompter.
He reads
That's what he was ready to do. I mean, we were really working. I went there and I was like, I am going to do a couple stories a day. I'm out there. I am putting the packages together. We were doing a lot because at least my attitude was, I'm here to get out of here, right? Yeah. Like I want to put stuff together because I want to get to bigger markets and everything. He was there to sit in that studio and read the news.
Apparently he's still reading the news, isn't he? He might be in LA. Who knew Color 8 was a factory for
a theater,
big time broadcast journalists, right?
It was okay. So I had this great first impression of you, but where you really showed your stripes, my first day of anchoring this new news, I don't know if you even recall this, but they threw me into this no anchoring training, live TV. We had to work our own teleprompter with our foot. Do you remember that foot pedal?
Yeah, of
and
course.
I had worked in TV before, but the teleprompter was all run out of the control room. So all of this was different. So I'm sitting there. Everything absolutely went wrong on this newscast. Like no one cued me that it was about to start. I'm looking to the other side. I'm starting to read. All of a sudden the first package goes and the script disappears. I think the script disappears. Because you've anchored, what has happened is that I should have kept pushing that pedal to go through the script to see more script, more fully down. I'm completely hyperventilating that I have no teleprompter. You, who's nicely standing in the studio for moral support, you come tearing through the studio and jump under the desk while the package is running. And as I'm shuffling through my papers to read the next few stories of the first segment from the papers, you're under the desk with your hand pushing that pedal.
Yeah.
It was so nice. And you're just going through to get the teleprompter into the right place. And I'm just like, oh. And then as soon as we got to commercial, you looked at me and you were like, it's going to be okay. You're through the worst of it. You're going to be fine. And then everything else went wrong. Like the wrong guests came in for like the live segment that they hadn't told me who the guests would be. We didn't have time for weather. I mean, everything absolutely went wrong. And afterwards you came and you held my hand and you were like, you did great. It's going to be fine. And by the way, this is why you're in Billings, is to do this kind of stuff.
That's right.
But I
That's
just felt
right.
like you were just so supportive. Whereas, did our news director say anything? Did our station manager say anything? No, but you were there. You were there to help me. And it was just so kind. You just showed your character through all those times. So
Well,
thank you.
it's my pleasure. I have a vague recollection of that, of being under the desk and pushing the pedal.
Pushing that pedal. And I'm sweating. My heart is,
Yeah.
I mean, you're there on live TV and thinking like you're just being thrown to the wolves.
Well, I know that feeling, but I can tell you that what I said, that's why we're in Billings, it's exactly right, because who was really watching?
I mean, it's a good point. But you know what? More people were watching than we knew because do you
Maybe.
recall, like around Billings, we would get recognized
Yeah.
in a weird way. I remember I was once sick and I was coming from the doctor's office and had to stop at the grocery store for my medication or something. And so, I'm in a hoodie and all covered up. And someone was like, "Are you Elizabeth Pearson? I recognize your voice." And I was like, "What?" And then once we were all out, do you remember this? We went out. I rarely went out. I worked on the weekends, so
Yeah.
I hardly ever went out. I had zero social life there. But once we went out, it was us with Natalie wasn't there. That makes a difference for this story because you were dating her. And we were out with Lee and a couple other people.
Yeah.
And we were at some bar and these women started, and Scott Breen was there. These
Yes.
women totally started hitting on you and Scott and maybe Lee. I don't know. They're like, "You guys are on TV. Oh my gosh, you're on TV." And they thought it was like so cool. And you were not amused. So you pretended that we were engaged. So you said that like I was your fiance.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
This woman who was hitting on you was like, "Well, how can she be your fiance? She doesn't even have a ring." Yeah. And I was like, "Well, he's such a nice guy that he got me such a beautiful ring that it's too good for a place like this." So I'm not wearing it. So
That's so funny.
I feel like when we'd go out to eat, on the rare occasion we would, people would say things to us.
Yeah, sometimes they reckon, particularly if we're all together. Right?
Yeah, if we're all together.
That makes sense. I do think that, you saw this with some people that we worked with. To have an enduring career in local TV news, you really do have to, on some level, really like that. You have to like people coming up to you all the time. And people do like it.
Yeah.
I was never a big fan of that.
One time I remember you and Natalie and I were out to eat somewhere and a few people came up to our table because Natalie did the morning news.
Yeah.
You did kind of everything. And I was mostly in the evenings. So they're like, "We wake up with you and we go to bed with you. Ha ha ha." Like everybody thinks they're being really clever.
Yes.
And I can see occasionally, okay, but dealing with that kind of stuff all the time that you're out for dinner could get a little old.
Yeah, if you are lucky enough to be really successful in that business, then you become a part of a community and everybody knows you. At least where I live now, Pittsburgh is like that. Everybody knows these people that are anchoring the local news. They're genuine celebrities. That would get tiresome, I think. It's nice to be recognized and have people say that they enjoy you, but that would be tough. That would really be like being under the microscope all the time.
Do you remember enjoying the day-to-day work, getting assigned stories or creating stories to have to do in local news?
Well, I did. I really did enjoy Montana because I generally had enormous freedom to do whatever I wanted to do on a given day. It wasn't like you went to those morning meetings and people were brimming with great news ideas.
Those morning meetings were such a disaster.
Total disaster.
The assignment editor, she had no organizational skills whatsoever.
No, none. No leadership ability either.
No.
Right? So I felt free to do whatever. And I think when I went to my next job in the Tri-Cities, it was very different and a lot less fun. The freedom to just have, Larry the camera guy with you in a car and you could go and you could do whatever you wanted to do. I don't think I ever took that for granted. That was the best part of that job, in my view.
Mm-hmm. There were times that I wished we could even have a little more say.
Mm-hmm.
I got frustrated at having to like go do this story on the crash on the highway or these things that I feel like are not really interesting to anybody. You know, the city council meeting. I felt like
time fillers.
Yeah. I fought to do this week-long series about education in Montana. Mm-hmm. To me, that was interesting and important information to have. But afterwards, I remember the head honchos kind of saying, that took too much of your time. We need to have you more on these daily time fillers, sort of. And I thought, but that was actually good journalism in my book. But I understand it's local news. We didn't have a ton of people.
No. Also not a lot of news, so we probably had more time to do those kinds of investigative pieces than some other news reporters do in bigger places.
Yeah.
You know? My most recent broadcast stop was Bristol, Virginia, like the Tri-Cities. We went there for a year. It was not good. And, you know, if I could talk to my 28-year-old self, whatever it was, I'd say, you're crazy. You know, we got it in our minds that this was a step up from Billings, you know, the Tri-Cities. I'd never heard of the Tri-Cities. You know?
But if there's 3 of them, it must be good.
I don't think I'd heard of the Tri-Cities before or since.
No.
But we had it in our mind that we were a 50% jump in market size. Which it literally was. But,
it was. Yeah.
You know, in terms of lifestyle and, you know, the day-to-day, it was not. I mean, Montana was a much more fun place to live, I thought.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just wasn't fun for me. And I was like bottom rung reporter on the weekends. And, you know, we didn't have the freedom there that we had in Montana. This was like a real TV station. So they were sending me to county commissioner meetings every day. I was miserable there, just miserable.
Did you ever, this might be a difference for being a man and a woman, but did you ever get comments about your looks or your delivery or anything like you need to improve this? Because I have some stories about that.
Well, I'd like to hear them. I got a number of comments. I'm not sure if it was from people at the news station or I would send my tapes out and I'd get comments back, but people didn't like my delivery. They thought it wasn't newsy enough. I wasn't really buttoned down in my attempts to make myself sound newsy. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any concern about that. I was just going to talk the way I talk.
You weren't serious newsman.
I never was. Yeah. No, I never was. So what did you hear?
Well, there's a few things. So sending my tape out, I would get things like, we already have one of you. That was so annoying to me because I would be like, what, you have a late 20s white woman?
Right.
It was just sort of this annoying thought of you just being pigeonholed for your looks. I know that's part of that business.
Yeah.
But I think I'm a lot more than just what my face looks like, or even interested in the stories I've done or the substance of what I can bring to this job. It just seems like the surface level stuff
not
is
interested.
So not interested. It's just what you look like. That really got to me over time. One time they hired this person to come in. She was some sort of on-air talent professional person, and she was going to be there for 2 days. And she evaluated all of us. We sent her our tapes ahead of time.
Right.
And then she watched us read live. And then she gave us her professional appraisal. So I came off the set and she said to me, honey, in this business, some people have it. You don't have it. And I was like, what? And she goes, sorry. Basically like, that's it. This is the end of the road for you. And the rational part of me was like, all right, one random lady's opinion, but it was also a little bit frustrating. Like you're saying there's some secret sauce that I just wasn't born with.
Very discouraging. Yeah.
The next day she comes in and she says, hey, come on back here. Basically, she wanted to do my hair and makeup her way because, as you might recall, we had to do all our own hair and makeup. And I am not a hair and makeup person. I didn't know how to do all that. I mean, I could do what I could for the show, but she does me up.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, go onto the set, go read again. And I did. And I come off, she goes, oh, honey, now you've got it.
Made all the difference.
It made all the difference. It was just hair and makeup.
She just needed to do your makeup. That's all.
She just needed to zhuzh me up.
Yeah.
And I thought, really?
Yeah.
Is that really where we are?
Well, it also probably made you feel a little better in that this was somebody that you could safely disregard completely.
Yes, that's true. But I think there were just all these little indicators that kept coming my way as I would send my tape out and I would get these things back. I knew this from the start. This is not a business that's either a meritocracy or really based on the substance of the work. But the more you look at it, it's like, am I really going to be solely judged on what someone thinks of how I look through this whole journey?
Yeah. This
is really depressing.
It is, but there's no doubt that that's what local TV news is. It just is. You know, I saw that when I went to the Tri-Cities. There were miserable people working at that television station, and they didn't have a lot of talent. I mean, there's a reason people are working in these places, and they work there a long time. And there are a few exceptions, but there are a lot of people that are not talented, and they're not happy, and they just have a certain polish that's satisfactory for that market.
Yeah.
And they have their career there. It's very superficial business.
Yeah, it is.
Very superficial.
It is. I think I kept trying to kind of fight that. I think I kept thinking, I'm going to try to inject some more substance into this. Like in the series I would try to do, or I'm going to somehow get around that. And then finally I was like, you can only fight the beast for so long. I'm not the one making the decisions about my future. It's these news directors from other stations. And at best, where are you probably going to... I mean, what I really wanted to do was get to the network.
Yeah.
That funnel is so tiny.
Stuff.
Those chances are so small. So like at best, you're going to get to, you know, Minneapolis or Dallas or something. I mean, perfectly fine places to live, but probably just sitting and reading news at an anchor desk, which didn't sound as interesting to me. Anyway, it is such an interesting, crazy business.
So would you do it differently? Would you do something different than you did to try to get into the business if you could do it over again?
It's a really good question. A part of me thinks I should have, if I had started younger, like if I had gone in right after college, I don't know if I could have handled it. Because I was in my late 20s when I went to Billings. And even then, that was really challenging for me. So I don't know if I could have done it at 22. Part of it was my schedule. I had either Wednesday and Thursday or Monday and Tuesday off. So anytime you guys or anyone was doing anything, I was working generally. So I really felt like I didn't have any social life. I mean, I didn't go on a single date the entire time I was in Billings. Yeah. I didn't really have any friends except friends from work. I felt very isolated there. So I think it would have been hard. So I left before my contract. I left before the 2 years were up, and they got really mad at me. They were like, you can't do this. You're going to have to. And I was like, I'm leaving the business. Yeah. I'm not going to another station. I'm just fully leaving. Right. So
sue me.
Yeah, right.
I just had a friend of mine's son reach out to me about getting into this business. And he's a freshman in college, and he wanted to know what should he do. And I told him with no hesitation, you're too young to go to the middle of nowhere and try to get on TV. I said, just go to a city where you want to be and try to get an internship or something behind the scenes. You learn about it. You can make your resume tape once you get to know people and sort of figure out how the business works and if that's what you want to do. I didn't hesitate in giving that advice, in large part because he's just a young kid. And I can't imagine him going out into the Wild West. But also because I think there are a lot of different ways you can go in that business, and you don't necessarily need to be on air. And if you're not necessarily going to be on air, you're certainly not going to learn all the ins and outs of this business from a production standpoint or, whatever else it is by going to Billings, Montana. You'll just get used to being on camera,
Yeah.
which is good, but there's a lot more to it.
I think that's such a good point. I think it does depend what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be on camera, you really do need to, like you said, take those reps in a smaller market.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go to New York and expect that's going to be your trajectory
Right.
starting in New York. But if you want to be a producer, if you want to be an editor, if you want to be some sort of technical person, I bet you could start in a larger market and learn that stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to get a lot more interesting work being a producer. So I think it does just depend what you want to do. And it's a different world now too, right? With
Definitely.
Technology,
Yeah.
You can put yourself on tape so much easier.
Yeah.
Not even on tape, digital.
Yeah.
I mean,
Whatever it
do you
is,
remember
whatever it is they're using.
We'd make those
right.
ginormous, whatever, what were they called?
I don't know, but they were
betas?
They were like this big.
And redo them and then redo them. And
yeah. I remember we'd have a Nerf bat and ball, and Scott Breen and I would play home run derby in the newsroom on the weekends. And one of us would pitch, the other one was at bat, and you had to hit the Nerf ball over the beta tapes that were on the top of the desk for a home run. And that's what we would do. It was really fun. Those were really fun times. When I was doing sports, I remember that after we would do sports, we would all go to Gussex across the street. But what I also remember is we didn't necessarily wait until after the newscast to go to Gussex. Sometimes Chris and then Scott would want to go to Gussex before the 10 o'clock, like between the 6 and the 10, and they would have drinks, and they would sometimes take a Jack and Coke to go, bring it back to the news station, on a Friday night, and they'd be drinking. They're getting ready for the sportscast, which, by the way, doesn't really require sobriety in any way. I mean, you're just basically, Chris used to say, you're playing in the sandbox. That's all this is. And,
yes,
it's supposed to be
I
fun.
remember you saying that too. Yeah, let's have fun. Let's play in the sandbox.
Yeah. And I also remember when Natalie and I did the morning show, and we would be in there 3 a.m. She would go earlier than I because she was producing it. So maybe I'd get there at 4. But another funny thing about that experience, I moved to Montana when I was 26 years old, something like that. And I was skinny when I got to Montana. And what I didn't fully appreciate was that I had hit the stage of life where my metabolism was changing. And so I'd go to the station at 4 o'clock in the morning, get ready for the show. We'd do the show. And then right after we were done with the show, I would go to Burger King and I'd get a breakfast. Before I knew it, over time, I started to feel tightness in my shirt.
These shirts seem to be shrinking.
True story. And it never occurred to me what was happening because it had never happened before. I could eat whatever I wanted. I couldn't do that anymore. So we were eating such garbage. We were eating like at Fuddruckers in the parking lot and Burger King. And I was getting fat. I was ballooning. And before you knew it, my my neck was like spilling over the top of my shirt. Things weren't fitting. No, I'm completely serious. I must have gained 10 or 15 pounds from that.
From that morning show.
And before I knew it, I had to get a whole new wardrobe.
I don't ever remember you being heavy.
I think I was heavier, for sure.
So you were doing that morning show together for a while, and then you got off the morning show, though.
Yes. At some point, we got moved on to the noon news, which was the cushiest, it's the cushiest job. It was a 9 to 5. You go and do a story during the day and anchor the noon news. That was the easiest gig. The morning show took a toll.
Yeah.
That was rough. I did a lot of different things over the course of 3 years there. I do remember my negotiation. The reason that I ended up doing news, I was on the weekend 10 o'clock sports. I anchored that. And then Scott Breen decided he wanted to come back. It didn't work out where he was, and he wanted to come home. So the general manager asked me, would you be okay moving over to the anchor desk for the weekends. And I said, happy to do that, but I think we should talk about a raise. And at the time, again, I think I was making maybe $16,000 or something like
Right.
that. And
I just want a 10% raise.
So what I asked for was $20,000, which
Oh, how dare you.
This was really audacious on my part. And Bruce said, that seems like a lot. He said, what about 18.5 or whatever he said? I said, I'll tell you what, Bruce, why don't you give me the $20,000 and we'll revisit this in 30 days. If you're not happy with how I'm doing, then you can go back to the proposed 18.5 salary. And that was really the extent of Bruce Cummings' negotiating ability. He didn't know what to do with that, so he said yes. And so
I wish I had known that.
Got my 20,000.
Wow. Because I was so intimidated by the renegotiations.
Yeah.
Because as I said, they changed my job 6 days into it. Then they changed it a couple months later. And so I would have to go into these negotiations and I was panicked. And I think I only would get like $1,000 out of them at best. I should have known. I should have taken the Jonathan Marcus approach to negotiating.
Yeah, well, look, it was maybe my proudest moment. Led to a legal career. I haven't looked back.
Right? And probably your biggest salary bump percentage-wise.
In my life.
Ever. Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, that's a 25%
that was huge.
increase right there.
It was huge.
Did you get your haircut? That was the one perk we had with our tiny little salaries, is I got free haircuts every month at the salon.
Well, I did get my haircut. I don't recall that was a perk of the job. Maybe it was. I can't remember.
Free haircuts. The only perk.
Oh, wow.
For a long time, I thought I wanted to like write a book or a screenplay or a something about that time in Montana.
Me too.
Because
I always thought about that.
Maybe we should do it sometime if we ever could find the time. Because I just thought you cannot make up these characters when they say truth is stranger than fiction. And like I said, I have journals. I have documentation of little examples that I can't remember. I could read them probably and bring back.
You cannot make that stuff up.
It's kind of a marvel that shows got on the air as many times a day as they did.
Absolutely remarkable what went on there. So if we were to do a screenplay or a teleplay or whatever, there's so many different directions you could go. It could be pure comedy. It could be a dramedy. It could almost be like a mockumentary style thing.
I mean, all of these work. They're all on point.
Yeah, it's like Northern Exposure. That's what it was like.
That's why it's comforting to talk to you, because you got it. Like no one in my life can ever quite get it. It was not that long. Like for me, it was less than 2 years, but it was so impactful because it was so bizarre. Of
course, it's like it would also impact your life if someone put you on a ship to Mars. for 2 years.
With characters pulled out of central casting.
Right. You know? Right. It'd be memorable for you, right?
It would. So a few people that were my life rafts who I could actually talk to and relate to. And then just these couple bizarros.
Have you been back to Montana?
I've definitely not been back to Billings. I have mixed feelings about going back to Billings. It really was a strange time for me.
I understand. Yeah, you don't need to go back to Billings.
No. Unless we want to
it'll live in
have a reunion.
In our memories, right?
Our memories. Right. Do you ever look back and think like, what if about the TV stuff? Or do you feel like that was just a good time in your life and it was time to move on?
I don't think what if. I felt sort of like a square peg in a round hole in that TV business anyway. I never felt like it was quite a fit for what I had fun doing. More so of a fit when I did sports because that was more personality driven. I knew early on that I would never be able to do straight news at a local TV station. Just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't deal with those strictures. But
I mean, you were so talented. I remember Well, you're so funny, first of all. And I remember there was this guy, I feel like he was on the CBS morning show at the time when we were in Montana. And I remember thinking, Jonathan should have that job. My memory is this guy would take a dart and like throw it into a map. And wherever it would land, he would go to that place and do a story. Yeah. And so it was just this random, like creative, find a story. And we did that at one time. In our viewing area, I think we each like took a location and found a story there. Yeah. Do you remember? And that was really fun. I loved kind of just find the story. And you totally excelled at all of those things. Anything that had like a tiny bit of creativity, you took it and ran with it. And you were always added humor. And I remember thinking like, you need a job like that. Like you could do so much of a better job than that CBS morning guy. And I just felt like it was a little square peg. I mean, there's no way you should just be told to like cover the city council meeting or that kind of stuff. That's just boring. Like you had way too much personality for that kind of stuff.
It's nice of you to say. I don't know if I had too much personality, but I do know that I could not have done that. I just couldn't have done. And that's sort of what I had to do in Bristol, and it wasn't going anywhere fast.
Yeah.
So I had to make a change. But look, I'm really glad that I did it. What an adventure, right?
What an adventure.
Oh, man. It was great.
I feel like I could talk to you forever. This has just been so delightful. Thank you
for all this pleasure. Fun. Thanks for asking me. It was such a thrill to hear from you.
So fun to see you. Thanks for all your time, and just thanks for being such a great person in my life.
Oh, thank you. And I have fond memories too. It's wonderful to reconnect with you.
I count myself so fortunate to have had a colleague and friend like John. You can see how he made work a lot more fun. After John got out of TV news, he did a few other things and eventually became a lawyer. I loved getting caught up with him. Here are some takeaways from our conversation. Number 1, take risks. Take the new job. Make a move. Guess what? If it doesn't work out, you can change the situation. You're in charge of your life, and you'll be living an adventure along the way. 2, situations can be defined by how we look at them. Is work drudgery, or are you playing in the sandbox? 3, if someone new comes into your space, be the one with the big smile and the welcoming attitude. It may help that person more than you even know. 4, if you're being evaluated on purely superficial qualities, definitely time to move along. And finally, number 5, reach out to people from your past. Connect with someone who's made a difference in your life. I can tell you with complete assurance, it is really fun. I'm so grateful to Jonathan Marcus for his time and for his friendship. If you'd like to hear more about people who work in television, check out episode 23 with Ken Fuchs, the director of The Bachelor, Shark Tank, Family Feud, and lots of other TV shows. Or episode 20, when I shared about my experiences as one of the first employees of the Food Network. You can find those on our website, whatitslike2.net. You can also sign up for our newsletter there. If you're not already following us on social media, please do. And if you'd like to keep this show going, there's a Support the Show link at the bottom of the show notes page. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Thanks for being curious about what it's like.